people that have suggested I learn how to read tide tables, which is kind of them. I appreciate their suggestion. I don't actually read them. I have a team of people that do it on my behalf, and they do it very well. But aside from that, San Francisco, yes, not our finest hour. But I must say that there's absolutely nobody on this ship amongst the crew who bears any responsibility whatsoever for San Francisco, apart from me, because I vicariously represent the management ashore and the entire operation of the cruise, whether it's from ashore, shore facilities, or the ship itself. As you may have noticed, the ship wasn't even there for most of the time that you were having to stand in the street. But if we wind it back to how did it happen in the first place and what was the timeline, on the Friday before you joined us on the Tuesday, the San Francisco pilots sent an email to head office to say we've just received new sounding charts of berth 27, and they show less water than there should be, which is a concern because there's an extremely low tide coming on the Tuesday. Now, okay, the tide tables tell us that. We knew that years ago because the tide tables are produced years in advance because the tide is a predictable thing. Everybody knew the low tide was coming. However, port authorities have a responsibility to maintain the depth on their berth. If you look at our navigational charts, every berth we go to has the depth of the water alongside at low water on the chart. That is the depth guaranteed by the port. I was a harbour master in a former life, so I've had the other end of it as well, the hydrographic survey and producing that data. So the port guarantees a certain depth on the berth. And to achieve that, they have to do maintenance dredging. And how much dredging they have to do depends on where the port is and how many rivers, etc. flow into the port and how much rubbish builds up on the seabed. Well, however, in San Francisco, for some reason, they hadn't been dredging Pier 27 or Pier 35, the alternative cruise berth. And when they did the soundings ahead of this low tide, they found that there was 3 feet less water on the berth than they advertised. So when the ship was planned for this cruise years ago, they look at the berth depth, they look at the tide, and the two match together, and it's fine, we can be there. You suddenly take 3 feet away from the depth alongside, and we can't be there. Now this is Friday in the afternoon. The office got hold of all this. We need to review these soundings to make sure that the ship is safe. Well, it wasn't difficult because the ship couldn't be there. It was a mathematical certainty that if we stayed alongside, the ship would go aground. So we had to make a decision. This is Friday afternoon, you're coming on Tuesday. We had to find accommodation of some sort for 3,000 people, facilities for 3,000 people, refreshments for 3,000 people, with a weekend coming up. And I have read that people are concerned, why didn't we have a contingency plan? Well, the number of turnarounds we do in a year, to have a contingency plan for every eventuality, the company would go out of business very quickly. It's like you being on an aeroplane and the aeroplane suddenly having a technical problem, so they sit you there on the ramp and say, we can't go anywhere, we've got a technical problem. However, there's another plane coming in 5 minutes, you can jump on that one. That doesn't happen. The same as railways, they don't have a backup train just in case the train you're on breaks. We don't have a backup ship, we don't have hotels on standby. You imagine a standby charge for 3,000 people in San Francisco on a maybe basis every 2 weeks. It's not physically possible, not financially possible or viable to do that. So we had to deal with 3,000 people that are potentially going to be standing on the street, sadly, which is what happened for a lot of you, I know. And they managed to get a conference room in a Hyatt hotel and food, in inverted commas, and a facility that the terminal provided. That was all that could be done in the time available. They offered us alternative berths, and then they discovered that they were much the same. They hadn't maintained them either, or the fendering, which is the cushion bit between the ship and the concrete, wasn't suitable for a ship of this type. This isn't a cargo ship, so we can't just go anywhere. And of course, if you go to a cargo terminal, there's absolutely nothing. At least in San Francisco, where we were, there was a building of sorts. Otherwise, it would just be a slab of concrete. And to try and organise a temporary terminal on a Friday afternoon to be built and ready to go first thing Tuesday morning Well, if anybody could do that, they're miracle workers. So anyway, the ship couldn't go alongside or stay alongside because there was insufficient water because the depth of the berth hadn't been dredged. So we came in, everybody got off as normal. We loaded as many stores as we could until 12 o'clock, which was my deadline for leaving. We left the berth, went to the anchorage off Oakland, and then we came back at 8 o'clock, which mathematically was the earliest we could get back into the berth without having wheels underneath us. And to achieve that, we actually reduced our safety margin by 2/3 underneath the ship. We're required to have 10% of our draft as clearance beneath the ship. Well, we're 9 meters, give or take, underwater. So 10% of that, roughly a meter, and we went down to 1 foot so we could get back in quicker to get you on board. And we actually came back in the wrong way around. The normal way to berth in San Francisco, and you'll see that on Tuesday when we get there, on Friday, sorry, when we get there, is backwards. We came in forwards because the ship tends to be heavier at the back, so it sits in the water with about half a meter difference between the front and the back. So by coming in forwards, it meant we could come in quicker because the ship is lighter and there was more clearance at the front of the ship on the shallow water. It also meant that the propellers, which are the expensive bit, were still in deep water nearer to the bay, so they weren't going to be damaged if the worst came to the worst. And I know other people have said that the dredging is just a cover-up. As you said, there was something wrong with the ship. I assure you there was absolutely nothing wrong with the ship. Had we not gone, and had you got on board on time, we would still be sitting in San Francisco as the newest hotel on the waterfront, and we'd be going absolutely nowhere. So it wasn't a case of misreading the tide tables, it was a case that the pilots actually read the tide tables and all the hydrographic information correctly, as did my team on here, and we made the decision that rather than go aground, it's better to delay all of you coming on board. Another plan that we had with the company was to cancel the departure on Tuesday and actually make it on Wednesday. So tell all of you, okay, embarkation is 9 o'clock Wednesday morning. But that didn't really solve the problem because most of you will be in transit and we've still got to find hotels for you. And to say to San Francisco we need 3,000 beds tomorrow is not going to happen. So it was a big juggling act and it wasn't good, and none of us are proud of what happened on the quay, but I'm afraid it was the best that could be done in the time available given the circumstances. And I'm pleased to say that they've now dredged continuously since we left, and they've taken 5 feet of spoil away from the berth. So now, whatever the state of tide, whether it's an extreme tide or not, the ship will be able to sit there. That may be no consolation to any of you, but at least it means we're going to get in, regardless of the tide, to get you off and get you home. It's a bit like shutting the door after the horse has bolted, but at least they've done it now. It's just a shame they didn't do it before. And sadly, all of you had to pay the price. So again, on behalf of Princess as a whole, my heartfelt apologies. We've been told what we can do on here in the way of compensation, and I know a lot of you aren't happy with that either, and I can fully understand where you're coming from. However, our hands and my hotel team's hands are tied, and it is what it is, I'm afraid. So hopefully it hasn't cast a shadow over your entire holiday. I'm not naive, I'm sure it's a shadow of some sort, but hopefully we managed to pull it out of the bag and give you a holiday after that you'll take home some nice memories from. The weather's been very kind to us so far. A little bit gloomy today, which is disappointing, and I think possibly a little bit windy tomorrow. However, you are still on holiday, and I hope you're having a fantastic time here, inside the ship, even though I appreciate getting on board was not a nice experience for any of you.
Well, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, very pleased to keep that applause going. I know our wonderful guest services team are here as well, and of course, it's not an easy decision, and as Captain said, this kind of all falls on